Hello, everybody. This is the A Serious Man. I thought it was about time to do a small video on how I got into comic books. A little bit about myself. I've been putting out memes. Doing a few short videos, doing unboxings. Nothing that any fake comic book fan couldn't do. So I thought it was about time to do a little video just talking about my history of how I got into comic books. Before I do that, if you're watching this video, please do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share this video out to your friends. Thank you. Now, when I was a kid growing up, we didn't watch TV. We didn't have a TV in our house in the living room until I was about 6 or 7. My parents had a little black and white TV that they'd bring out every once in a while, and they would let us watch a show, like an old classic show, like Get Smart or the Andy Griffith Show. And when it came time for commercials, they would turn the volume down, and when the volume got down toward the lowest volume, the screen would black out. And then they'd bring it back up roughly when the commercial was over. So we didn't watch a lot of TV. When we did watch TV, they would black out the commercials, and that was how I grew up. That was how I experienced television and marketing as a child. So I wasn't exposed to the normal children like television shows. My experience with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe. I knew G.I. Joe and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles through the toys. My grandparents gave me and my sister a couple of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys. I don't remember how old I was, but this was my experience with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It wasn't via TV show or ad marketing. It was a little toy, and I enjoyed them. It was the same with G.I. Joe. My aunt and uncle gave me once for my birthday a bunch of G.I. Joe toys, and they were cool. And I played with the toys. But I had absolutely no idea that these toys had any connection to comic books or TV shows or any of the rest of it. I knew nothing beyond the extent of a little piece of plastic that I played with. And so as a consequence, I would create I grew up experiencing most things through my imagination, right? Playing outside a lot, but also playing with toys, but playing where everything was, created in my own head. It wasn't until later, I was a little bit older, second or third grade, when we got our first color television, and television that they actually set up in the living room, and then you'd watch TV. But even then, for a lot of years, my main experience growing up was playing outside, and with toys that didn't have a pre-arranged construct behind them. It was simply we had to use our own imagination to create the stories and the characters and all the rest of it. As far as like Transformers, I never saw the Transformers show, and those were toys that I would see at a friend's house maybe, and they were cool because you could change from a robot to a car or whatever, and those were kind of cool. But I wasn't really exposed to a lot of the kid stuff when I was growing up. The same is true for comic books. I didn't read a lot of comic books as a kid. But there was at one point I came across in the 90s animated series, the Batman series, the Spider-Man series in particular, the X-Men series, and I watched a little bit of these shows, and I enjoyed those. And those were really my introduction to comic books. Before that, I remember watching a little bit of the Batman, the 70s TV, live action show. The movie. I believe we watched the movie on TV. And that was like, and it was not a big thing. But when I got a little older, I got into the animated show. So like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, going into junior high. And the Amazing Spider-Man animated show was a show that I really enjoyed. And it was just like one small aspect of things. So, okay, putting that aside now, on to my history as a consumer of comic books as a medium. So I did get started. I was familiar with the Spider-Man character from the animated series. And I must have been, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade, and I was in California. I was at a thrift store in California. I believe it was a Deseret, and I was looking at the books, and I remember I picking up. My mom bought me this book that I picked up, and this was a little tiny paperback, which was already, I mean, it was already very old when I bought it. Used at a thrift store, and this little tiny trade paperback was which had really small, like tiny reprints of original Amazing Spider-Man issues 14 through 20. And I remember reading these, and I really loved these books. I remember spending this summer reading this book at my grandma's house. Very tiny print. And I remember I had in my mind, I read the book in my mind with the voices of the characters from the animated series. And this here was my introduction into comic books. And that was my thing. And over the years, I really did grow to have an affinity for the Spider-Man, the character. And I liked the fact that he was an outsider, didn't really get along with anyone. He was faced normal problems, and just like an everyday kid. So over the years, I would read Spider-Man comics. Later on, when I was like in high school, I found that our local library had the collections of all of the original Spider-Man issues collected in these black and white, these really thick black and white essential volumes. And here you'd get like the entire series, basically, a couple hundred issues over the course of a few volumes. I read all of the early Spider-Man issues through that. Now that was a little later. That would be, on top of other things, because I always had a sort of an eclectic interest. So I enjoyed video games and other things as I got older. Classic films. I started to get into Japanese. It was in high school too that I got into Shakespeare and into a lot of the films of Akira Kurosawa, which I did discover, I think, originally like in high school, because it was, I heard that it was inspiration to George Lucas and Star Wars, and I did have interest in that as well. But back to the first comic books that I ever got, apart from that digest, Amazing Spider-Man digest, I was in a local comic book store. I think it was like around 7th or 8th grade. I was in a local comic book store, and I hadn't really gotten into comics yet. I remember digging through the dollar bin and looking for comics, and I got my mom to buy comics for me. So one of the very first comics that I got was this one here. I was attracted to the story. Is this one here, which was covered by Sal Buscema. It's a Spectacular Spider-Man. It's got really cool artwork that really stuck out to me. And then over the years, I would collect this series, back issues. Once I got started there, I had to this first issue was a part 2 in a 3-part story arc. So then, of course, naturally, you have to collect, the other issues in that arc. So then, of course, I wound up tracking down over time the other issues here that played out that story arc. And then Tombstone, I tracked down earlier issues of Tombstone, including a story arc that from Spectacular and Web, where Robbie Robertson was the Peter Parker's fellow journalist or coworker at the Daily Bugle, who gets arrested and winds up in jail with Tombstone, who he has this hidden sort of a secret childhood past with, and that was a story arc that they also used in the animated series. The same time that I bought that first Spectacular Spider-Man, I also picked up in a pile of other comics, which I honestly can't remember all of them. There were probably maybe 7 to 10 comic books, but the other one that I got in that little pile was this little thing from Image, Divine Right. It was a Jim Lee. I was attracted to the female form on the cover, I think, and it was an alright story. It was a 12-issue story arc, which I since collected. I found I'm missing 2 issues. I think it's like issue 3 and 12. But and then this one, I believe this one was also in that pack, which is so these two issues from the Divine Right comic, which I later tracked down online when I started trying to put together my collection. If I remember, this was a story about a guy who basically gets pulled into an alternate reality in a computer, sort of an online computer world, which I guess has been done before and has been done since, but it was kind of an interesting story, and he is the savior of this alternate universe. Anyways, I also could be totally wrong about the story because it's been so long since I read it. I might be confusing it with something else, but anyway, that was my early foray into comic book fandom, and I just thought I'd share that for no reason, just randomly for content. If you like the video, please like, share, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time.